Mohammed Dawjee, let me ask you about your installation in the Oscillations exhibition.
Sure. My installation is titled Spectres of Äkhamis, and it refers to the presence, the historic presence of an indigenous system of rivers and springs, known colloquially or creolized as Äkhamis. These rivers and springs run currently buried underneath the city of Cape Town and throughout the Cape Flats as well. They are nurtured by the mountain, Table Mountain, and they were the lifeline and the life support for indigenous inhabitation of the Cape Peninsula for thousands of years.
And as far as I could see in the installation, you use several audio cassette recorders to play tape loops of recordings of that water. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. So I've spent the past year and a half touching base with the water and being in proximity to the water. I've always been interested in kind of the spirit of places, the spirit of place, and it's something that I wish I could address more in my work as a performing musician. However, performing musician spaces tend to kind of shut out everything and create a black box for you to present your work in, or stage. So this work came about for two reasons. One, I had started visiting water bodies back home where I live, and wondering what they were saying if I was spending time listening to them. And the second part of that is that I've always been interested in how the colonial structures that are embedded specifically in the city of Cape Town are concretized and permeate throughout the spatiality of Southern Africa and South Africa as a nation state itself till today. Tomorrow we celebrate 30 years of democracy. And I put that in air quotes because ask any South African whether it feels like that and you will get a very different response. The reason being is that there still exists this phantom of coloniality that permeates every aspect of Southern African life, and that the remnants and the spectres of our history, they live with us. So water for me is a medium of memory. It ran throughout time, before the arrival of colonizers and after their supposed dissolution. And so when I take this practice of listening to this body of water that is very old, coded, and that remembers a lot, it becomes an exercise then in translating that to the audience and also drawing on my lived experience. I grew up in so-called Rainbow Nation, which is a very, very complicated, difficult and complex society to inhabit, because on the one hand it's a myth, on the other hand it's a dream, and at the very pragmatic and practical level it is a struggle.
Why did you choose to use an old technology like the audio cassette?
Yes, I think technology, because of the way that the world is structured in terms of the pace of technology, is an archive. Like a particular technology speaks to us in a particular way. So I gravitated towards it intuitively. And as I started to investigate why perhaps I gravitated towards it, I was wondering about whether it has something to do, first of all, with my age group, and that the work will speak to those people who know that thing more than it will speak to others, or who have like a nostalgia or a curiosity about that thing. So that was the one reason I think that came to light. It wasn't clear in the beginning, but it came to light that actually the familiarity of this as an archival tool in South Africa, I remember in the 80s and the 90s, I mean I wasn't around in the 80s, but I know from seeing my grandfather's collection, tapes were very useful tools for transferring information. So from things like community speeches, gatherings, prayer meetings, or khadats that he used to host, tape was a very important or useful way to transfer information. I had a conversation here with someone from Ghana, an artist from Ghana, who said his family used to send letters via tape because there were no telephones, cassette tape. So it harks back to that. There's a mysterious kind of quality to it. And then in working with water, as I started to transfer these recordings onto tape and cut the tapes and mess around with the tapes, I realized that tape itself has a very liquid quality. It wobbles, it warbles, it doesn't want to do what you want it to do. And I always appreciate that in creative processes too, which is something I kind of forgot a little bit this week and had to remind myself of, is that I want to listen to what the material wants me to do. And tape has been very generous and generative in that sense.
How did you connect the tapes in the exhibition and the finished radio composition that you did, which has a similar title but written a bit differently?
Yes. How did I connect the... Oh yes. So I wanted to see this... I'm on a journey. I'm not a sound artist. I don't title myself as a sound artist. I'm interested in things. I'm interested in space. I'm interested in people. I'm interested in cities. I'm interested in history, and I'm interested in stories, and I'm interested in material. I went on this journey with these media, with cassette tapes, with hydrophones that I was curious about and started building, with the medium of water and that particular river, and I went on a journey with those things, and I collected every part of it. So I started to do a process which I call situated performances, which is to stand in proximity to a place and to dialogue with it through performing. I'm an improvising musician, I'm a jazz musician, and for me the session, the circle, has been a very important part of my learning experience. I used to attend, I wasn't formally educated as a musician, but I attended jam sessions regularly. My father would take me as a young child to jam sessions. And so this idea of dialogue has been integral to my process. So what I wanted to do was extend this beyond the formalized settings of music and start to dialogue with places and with so-called inanimate bodies, a river being one. And so each part of that built onto the next part. Dialogues built into the tape, built into the radio composition through the material that was recorded. But before that, it actually built into the Oscillations workshop that happened in Capetown, where I decided to prototype a situated performance, where I had taken the hydrophone recordings and taken over a building, which is the Centre of Humanities Research, Great Mall building at UWC, University of the Western Cape. And I imagined flooding this building with the water that is beneath the city. And proceeded to do that with the audioscape and some improvised performances, and recorded that again. Actually, I didn't record it, the team at THR was kind enough to record it. And that then formed another element. So it's almost like a tapestry or a palimpsest that keeps being built. And I'd be curious as to whether this iteration can become the underlay for another, because the river then continues to live in each instance.
It is beautiful. Let me ask one more question, because I'm just curious. So the audio cassette tapes in the installation, are they unique? Or if one of they tend to break the tapes, right? So if one of them breaks, do you have the same recording and put it in, or is it then a different?
No, I don't. It's something that has bothered me for the past few days, because I don't have many backups, and also I arrived here to a new set of tape players because I couldn't procure the tape players in South Africa. I only have one. If the tapes were to be destroyed, then the work will exist in that format here. And it is partly intentionally so, because I think that the way we treat and consider water needs to be questioned. And this is across the board. I think coming from the global south, we tend to point the finger at the global north. And I think that to a certain extent we need to acknowledge the violence of the history that has taken place. But we're also at a time when we need to come together and be honest about resources, be honest about how much impact we have on those resources, how much consideration we have for those resources, and how much agency those resources have on their own, so that we can turn this relationship around. Because if we don't, South Africa is always going to be a developing nation, because we've been made to be that. And not just South Africa, Africa is always going to be developing, because it's too beneficial to too many people for us to be developing. And we cannot be under the shadow of these resource curses. So I hope that the work really allows a moment for us to connect to how I heard that river, and to connect to all the layers of history that it holds, and to the violence that it holds, and to confront it, and to sit with it.